Парад! Смирно! Торжественному
It's Colonel General Gerasimov. He's in command of this parade. Formerly, he's a tankman.
Sergei, who are these gentlemen right here? Is this a special unit or brigade, or is it just made for this parade?
They belong to a special combined arms regiment, and they will now kind of they have to mark the distance or spacings between the marching formations. That's the intent and the purpose.
Okay, I see. Yes.
Yes. That's an indispensable attribute to any parade, to have this kind of mark.
Control your space, yes. Well, the parade has officially started here. We're going to see a lot of different military units, and as Sergei pointed out earlier, we'll see possibly some new hardware, if there's any, for the military here. It's pointed out in Western media about how Russia is spending money on its military, and sometimes it's a bit hysterical. It's a small percentage of what the United States spends on its military every single year. If Russia gets 20 new airplanes, it makes the news, okay? And I say that with irony.
It certainly is irony. We have to kind of observe here the drummers that are opening the parade. It's been a tradition for very many years. For the first time they did it in 1940, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, these are very young men. I mean, are these...
Yes, they are the cadets.
The cadets, okay.
From the military music school.
Amazing precision here. Again, this is you just joined us. This is the 67th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe, or as when in Russia we call the Great Patriotic War. Vladimir Putin opened up the parade, and now we've seen the first units marching. Very snappy uniforms, Sergei. I mean, is this purposely just for ceremony purposes here?
Well, this is special ceremonial uniforms.
Because they look kind of like, I'm sorry, like kind of like maybe 19th century? I mean...
Frankly, these are the uniforms that were in use in 1945 at that parade. You can see those special red breasts that they have on, which did not use anymore.
Well, you said that earlier that we're going to see different military districts because the country's broken up into military districts, so they're going to all be represented, all of the arms of the military, schools, universities. We'll see a wide variety of institutions here.
Not really. I would say that taking part in the parade, as you can see it now, are mainly the universities and military universities and academies which are based in Moscow. You'd not bring them from Vladivostok, for example, from other civilian towns.
Because they'd be doing it there, presumably.
Correct. But they also have a combined arms formation that represents the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. Indeed.
And we have to remind our viewers here that this is a commemoration of Soviet victory in 1945. So we have the Soviet Union obviously no longer exists, but we will have other republics, former republics, that will be celebrating this day also. It wasn't just Russians, it was all the peoples of the Soviet Union. So we could see it in Georgia, we will see it in Ukraine to one degree or another. Sometimes politics gets in the way, but for the veterans, it's still a collective memory.
Well, it's absolutely so. I can't agree more with you than that. Certainly. Although Russia legally and factually is the successor of the Soviet Union, that's why in Russia it's the most important event.
And as we were saying earlier, there's not one family in Russia that doesn't have a memory through a relative, a grandfather, a grandmother, or further on, of this great event, a tragic event. 27 million people perished in the Soviet Union fighting Nazism.
Yes, yes. I really, if I look at the people that I know, that I am closely friendly with, you really can find a family that didn't have anybody, or somebody who had lost his or her life in the war. Not necessarily as a serviceman, but many of them were just civilian casualties.
And you know, though this is a memory of something that happened 67 years ago, it's very obvious to this day it is still impacting Russia's demographics. Not only did we have a very difficult time in the 1990s with the collapse of the economy, but before that we had a huge demographic change here, and Russia has never recovered from it, and is recovering, I should say, but the impact is so immense. Unfortunately, Western audiences, particularly Americans, have this Saving Private Ryan perception of the Second World War. Well, most of the war, most of the casualties happened on the Eastern Front, not in the Pacific and not in Western Europe, and that should be remembered. And I would say the average citizen in the West, particularly in the United States, is not aware of that. And that's why it's a good idea to watch this parade on RT.
Well, if I may venture to add something, just in line with what you've been projecting as an idea, is that looking back, you would have to appreciate that the people, most of the people who lost their lives in 1945 were the people who were born after the revolution, after 1917. So they were the first generation of the people who were brought up in that spirit, and they had, let's call it Soviet education. They were most patriotic, and they were the first to join the army and to go to the front lines. And they were, most of them came from schools, from universities, in that patriotic fervor, you know what I mean? It's really a big tragedy, because that's the cream of the Soviet Union at that time, because they were mostly patriotically motivated. They lost their lives, and this is the biggest loss that Russia really had to suffer because of that. That's how I see it.
And of course, there's controversy that's still surrounding the war itself, the role of Stalin in the first 6 weeks of the war. To what degree is he responsible for victory? I mean, I've always liked to think of it as a victory of the people. This was a people's victory over Nazism, because they're the ones that gave their lives, and there's criticism of the way the war was fought in the beginning until lessons were learned. Again, Sergei, you're a little skeptical, but there is controversy still surrounding it. But the outcome, and there is no doubt, it was a victory of the Soviet people over Nazi Germany and its allies.
Yeah, again, if you go back to that, of course, Stalin is the most controversial figure. It's true, and it's indisputable that he was the leader of the country at that time. You cannot deny that. You cannot change it, because it did happen. Of course, you may probably think that many events and many battles would have been won or lost differently if it had not been for his insistence that certain events had to take place, if he had not issued special orders. Especially in the first days of the war, certainly big losses were very much contributed to his arbitrary. So he could not believe that, you know, we were losing so much ground to the Nazis, and he insisted on resistance and all these kind of things, but you know, the troops were not prepared for that. And there was a lot of controversy in the orders that they received from the Kremlin and from the local command, and the communication was broken. Anyway.
Yes, but then we had some great generals come in and fill in the void, like Zhukov and people like this.
That's true.
Amazing military minds and ability. But again, it was the average person on the ground that made the difference. And 27 million people died.
To remember Zhukov in connection with the parade, if I may, you have a monument to Zhukov, but you know why the monument is there? And because this is exactly the site and the place where he was reviewing the first parade, received the first parade in 1945.
So this is the 6th time I've done it, and I've learned something new. Thank you.
Okay. So that's the place. It's specifically chosen for that purpose.
Why don't we take a look at these pictures? And who are we seeing here? Can you recognize the uniform?
Cannot really see the insignia, maybe.
Okay, and these would be paratroopers?
These must be the paratroopers, or the Marines to be more exact. These are Russian Marines, for sure.
I find it quite interesting watching this parade this year because of Russia's political cycle. I mean, there's controversy in Russian politics like we haven't seen since the end of the Soviet Union. But in an event like this, it's a unifier, so it doesn't really matter what your political coloring is. Everyone in this country can enjoy the meaning of this parade in 2012.
It's indisputable. I would not even try to object to that because it became like a very important tradition that really unifies and brings people together and gives people a sense of pride.
Well, that's one of the things that in Western audiences and publics, they have a hard time understanding why Russia continues to invoke the memory of 1945. And it's because of the impact that war had on this country and its people. I mean, in the United States, for example, people are not going to be remembering the Second World War like it is remembered here. And parades like this give a good reason why for Western audiences to understand what happened here between 1941 and 1945. Wow, that's impressive.
Well, anyway, if you take a Western audience, I think you can also divide it into the categories that are already advanced in years, so to say, which remember all those days, and they certainly remember say the 25th of April is a big date for many of them.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could say the British, it's North Africa. For the Americans, it's the Pacific. But most of the war, most of the casualties.
No, I'm talking about the Torgau Day when the Russians and Americans met.
Yes.
Which was also a big event as well. And
we have to remind our audiences that the war is commemorated on the May 8th in the West, in Europe, and in the 9th. Sergei, do you want to tell the story? I'll tell the reason why.
Well, I may try, or
go give it a shot.
Whatever. One day I was reading the actual speech which Joseph Stalin was making to commemorate the victory. And of course, he had to acknowledge that the capitulation was signed on the 8th of May, which is a fact, but at the end of his speech he said, and this is why I want to proclaim the 9th of May the victory day for Russia.
Okay. Yeah, but
which was the next day following.
It was the next day following, so it's a time zone difference here, the reason why.
Yeah,
so because it was already the 9th in Russia, in Moscow, but it was still the 8th. It's still the 8th in Germany. So that's the reason why we have two different dates, the 8th and the 9th.
But he also specifically mentioned the 9th of May as the victory day for Russia.
So there's still the pictures we're seeing here it shows a military that's pretty polished here, but still a lot of problems with reform, like I pointed out earlier. We had with the end of the Soviet Union, we saw the military forces here deteriorate, and it's been a long process of putting them back into order, making them much more effective. Leaner and meaner, I think, is the favorite term these days. But there's still conscription here. There is some contracts where people enlist. So it's still a long process of reform here, but certainly better off than it was 10 years ago.
I would say so too. I'm not completely sure about the share of conscripts versus the professionals or people who serve in contract. I'm not sure about the numbers, but this share of the professionals is increasing with every year. Besides, as I said earlier, the incentive for young people to join the army. is also becoming sort of more attractive because they can have some benefit from serving the army, like education, like some other subsidies for studies and so on and so forth.
And looking at these pictures here, it's a stark reminder that the world is a very dangerous place. Russia lives in a neighborhood where we have changes going on all of the time. We have to remember South Ossetia, where Georgian forces invaded South Ossetia. Russia had to respond and had to learn some lessons from that. So the neighborhood isn't particularly peaceful, and there are other powers in the region that are arming as well. So you have to be prepared, and that's the kind of world we live in.
And that's what the army is for. And they say you have to keep your powder dry.
Exactly. And as we have President Putin coming back for a third term, we will see how Russia's military can work with its, I wouldn't say ally or even friend, NATO. And we'll see how that will unfold relatively soon. We have the Chicago summit coming up. There will not be a Russia-NATO meeting there, which is politically very important. And we will see how Mr. Putin will react to that. He hasn't said very much on foreign policy, but then again, he's only been president again for 2 days. This is his first major public event after assuming the presidency again.
Yeah, it was quite formal. I think what he had to state was quite formal. Although it does contain certain insights into the future, it does designate certain targets or objectives to be achieved in the coming years.
Well, as he said during his speech, is that we have to learn the lessons of the events of 1941 to 1945. And if you don't learn them, you relive them. And again, he was talking about how the world needs to be united in dealing with threats, not divided, or I would say, in my humble opinion, some countries in the world should not be unilateral in their foreign policy and military policy. Now, obviously, that's directed against the United States and its military adventures around the world.
You also may notice, talking about the parade, their cadence is slightly slower than it usually was. Previously it was 120 steps per minute. Now it's slightly below that, and you can see they kind of...
Is there a reason for that? Or is it aesthetics? I mean, it looks...
I think they calculated it. They look better or more impressive when they have this kind of cadence. Anyway, it was changed. For the first time, they used this cadence for the parade 2 years ago.
You're a real gold mine of information.
If you have a very, very sharp eye, you can notice that they walk slightly slower than they used to in the past.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, if you've just joined us, this is RT's coverage of the 67th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe, or as it's called here in Russia, the Great Patriotic War. We have a seeing of the review of numerous troops here, members of the military, not only being inspected by the President of the Russian Federation, but members of the military elite, and of course, audiences all over Russia and the world.
That's true.
You know, and I look at these veterans, after everything that has happened in this country from 1945 to the present, we've seen the country that they fought for collapse. We saw the new country, Russia, the Russian Federation, go through so much pain in the 1990s, and then consolidation in the 2000s. And so, for someone that's witnessed the Second World War, to see all of those changes, in addition, it's an amazing life to live.
Again, without being skeptical, but I would still have to admit that not all of them are happy with all the developments which have been taking place.
Sergei, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's definitely a mixed bag. I mean, there's change is painful for some, and I haven't come across my time in Russia, veterans, I think, that should be better taken care of by the state.
That's true.
They gave everything, and I don't think in many cases they weren't given much back. And I think that's a social issue, even a political issue that has to be addressed here. When you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it's a bit difficult to contribute to society. Society has to help you out. So
yeah, to give you, to provide for a decent living, these kind of things.
In about a minute or so, the troops will exit the Red Square, and we should see some military hardware. Sergei, I hope you're going to help us out on that one. Okay.
Yes, I'll try to go
I can recognize a tank and a plane. That's about it. Okay. Viewers of RT are being treated to this wonderful parade, and it's being also watched all across the Russian Federation. One of the, if not one of the most important day on the calendar for Russians. This is a day of amazing unity. And again, as I pointed out, in light of recent political changes, it's nice to have a day where everybody agrees.
Absolutely so. Conciliation. The last one, the concluding formation of the parade, is the Moscow Military Academy. It is one of the oldest academies, and I think it was, previously it was referred to as the Kremlin Military School. That's what it came from. Now we are supposed to have flutes and drums, and then the vehicles will come in, rolling.
Here we go. Are these like Russian Humvees?
Yeah, it's they call them.
Sorry for sounding so ignorant. I'm just not a military
They call them Tiger or Tiger,
okay,
whatever it is. It's a high mobility transport vehicle. It's certainly a contender to a Hummer.
What kind of military units are we seeing here, Sergei?
Actually, we can see now military vehicles, and
is this modern stuff, or has this been around for a while? Because everybody always asks those questions. Okay.
well, it's nice.
Is it a nice chassis with an old engine? I guess
It's an armored personnel vehicle. That's what you call it, and these gadgets are. They have 3-man crews, and they can carry up to 7 soldiers inside, riflemen. So this is the vehicle. These are the BTR-80 or APC-80. If you talk about the vintage is 1984. They were commissioned for the first time, but they're still in the inventory.
Effective?
Effective.
Okay.
They are effective. Cross-country capacity is excellent. To be frank with you, I used to ride in one of those in its predecessor. And the smoothness of ride is fantastic. It's like you driving a limo. Yeah, I'm telling you, so many wheels and suspension is quite good.
You're a true military man, I can tell.
Especially if you go cross country, if you know what I mean. It's negotiates all these humps and.
Now, what kind of tanks do we have here?
It's T-90. T-90 tanks. They are sort of upgraded versions of T-72, and they were commissioned in 1993, if I remember correctly. They're quite efficient, and their silhouettes are much lower than those of their competitors, and they're much lighter as well. So they have quite a lot of.
And they can move a lot faster.
Yes, they can move faster. And they have, it's a 1.5 millimeter gun that they have. And this gun can both fire projectiles, and it can also fire anti-tank.
There are foreign countries that buy this kind of military
a lot of them.
Material. Right?
I think so.
Russia is an exporter of arms around the world. I think it's number 2 in the world.
Yeah. These are self-propelled howitzers. They call it MSTA-S howitzers, 152 millimeters. And the main intent is to engage and destroy heavy targets. That is concrete emplacements and all these kind of things.
I mean, it's kind of interesting. As again, remember, both of us are children of the Cold War. Okay, so we're betraying our age a bit. But from an American perspective, this parade used to be watched. See what the Soviets have new this time. Okay, and this is the criminology and all that. Is that the same thing today, or is this just to show Russia's military profile? Okay, when they're
I think mostly is what you said. It's mostly to show Russian military profile and. Novelties, that is something novel, I'm not sure about that. Probably there would be some missiles that have recently been commissioned. That's another story, or approved for service. Coming back to this particular self-propelled howitzers, their vintage is 1989.
It looks quite formidable.
Well, that's anti-aircraft systems. They call it Buk M2, if you want exactly.
Now, would Russia be? Is this the kind of military material that would be sold abroad?
Yes,
okay.
definitely.
And do the Americans get really upset when the Russians sell this to some people? I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, absolutely understand what you're getting at. Because you still need to have it, and if you don't have it from there, you have it from there.
Okay, right. The arms market is very competitive. If you just joined us here in RT, this is the 67th anniversary victory parade on Red Square. In progress, we saw the troops first, and now we see military hardware.
Specifically now, we could see the anti-aircraft facilities.
Opening the parade was President Vladimir Putin. On his side, Dmitry Medvedev, Prime Minister of Russia. This is the first major event Mr. Putin is presiding over since his return to the presidency. And maybe in some ways quite fitting, this is an event for all Russians, whatever your political persuasion, whatever your income, your class, wherever you live. This is one event that all Russians take enormous pride in.
Okay, if I may, a few words about those vehicles that you could see there. It's a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun and missile systems. They call them Panzer S1, also designated as SA-22 Greyhound. They combine both firepower from the guns, actual guns, and the missiles. Now next, these ones are S-400 Triumph, known as S-21 Growlers. These are extremely effective anti-aircraft systems, and they can engage targets, all kinds of targets, that range up to 400 kilometers. It could be ballistic missiles and the hypersonic missiles and Also, they are effective against electronic countermeasures, you know what I mean, and AWACS, these kind of things, and they have a lot of versatility. They can engage up to 36 targets, and so it's besides this particular weapons, it's quite almost brand new. They were commissioned in 2007.
So this is some of the newest material that we've seen in this parade.
It's 2007. Then we are going to have, and we are having them, we have the Iskander M, known as in the NATO countries known as SS-26.
Now this is something that Russia has said it will employ as a countermeasure if the United States and its allies in NATO proceed with anti-missile defense in Europe.
That's true.
A very contentious issue between Russia and NATO. I don't see any real good resolution anytime soon. We have Mr. Putin coming back as president. We know his position. And we see that NATO is being very uncooperative, in my humble opinion, in dealing with Russia on anti-missile defense.
Right.
Obviously, Russia sees anti-missile defense directed against itself, not just countries like Iran. Right. So, to be resolved, put it that way.
Yeah, I think so too.
Kind of recap here, the parade started out with President Putin starting the parade, inspection of the troops, and then we've had 14,000 troops pass by. Now we're seeing new and not so new military hardware in the Russian military.
And now what I recognize is Topol-M, or in the NATO designation, the NATO is SS-27.
Parades like this remind the Russian people and the world that Russia remains a formidable military power, and it will defend its borders and neighborhood in these very troubled times.
Right, and just to add a few things, SS-27s, they are also accompanied or escorted by, they call them racer links, armored vehicles. You can see them around. These are the racer. They are slightly smaller than the Hummers, or than the Tigger that we first saw, but they are used for various reconnaissance purposes and control purposes and so on. Now again, it's armored personnel vehicles. That is at the beginning of the parade. Remember, it's but they are 80. And the helicopters.
Here we go. The flyover has started.
Correct. That wouldn't be a serious, big flyover. It's Mi-8 hit helicopters. Just to mention, they are in service in over 50 countries.
It's very interesting. I'd like to remind our viewers that being a resident of Moscow, you very rarely see anything in Russia, Moscow's airspace. So when these helicopters come by, it really surprises people because it's a closed airspace.
Yeah.
So not today. Very populated airspace here as we see these helicopters going by carrying banners, obviously.
Just to add a little line to it, the speed of these helicopters for you now is 100 kilometers per hour. And they are spaced by 50 meters from one another.
The parade is beginning to wind down here. I think we'll see a flyover of planes, at least traditionally.
No, it's only the helicopters.
Just helicopters this time, okay. Variations every single year, but more or less the same message. Remembering the tragic events of 1941 and 1945 when the Soviet Union lost 27 million people in the conflict against Nazi Germany and its allies, the conflict against fascism that saved Europe from fascism, which is quite poignant today if you look at the political situation in the European Union and abroad. The right is coming back as something Russia is watching very, very carefully.
best musicians.
One of the interesting things we saw during this parade is that every single generation alive today in Russia we have seen, all collectively remembering the great losses.
Little note about the musicians, it's 1,100 of them altogether. It's combined marching band from many different units.
We're coming to the close of the parade here on RT, the 67th anniversary of the end of the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War in Europe.
The tune they're performing now, it's a quite traditional tune. We call it Prощение Slavianki. In Russian and English, it would be a Slavic Maiden's Farewell, the most popular Russian march.
A hymn I'm sure everyone knows in this country.
In Russia, yes. Slavic Maiden's Farewell.
We're looking at these beautiful pictures, celebration. We encourage our viewers to learn more about the Second World War in Europe and the great conflict between the Soviet Union defeating Nazism. A story that needs to be told better for Western audiences. Well, we've come to the end of the parade here. Sergei, thank you very much for being with us.
Pleasure.
A beautiful event here, and a great event of unifying Russia on this day.
Thank you for inviting me. Hope that I was helpful.
Well, you join me here on Moscow's Red Square, where the Victory Day parade has just come to a close, celebrating the 67th anniversary of the role the Soviet Union played in the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Now, the parade lasted for just around an hour in length, and it was opened by the newly elected President Vladimir Putin. He paid tribute to everyone that had helped in that victory over Nazi Germany all those years ago. Now, 14,000 troops marched across historic Red Square just behind me, and they were followed by some serious military hardware. We saw armoured vehicles, as well as some high-tech tanks, followed up with howitzers, as well as some strategic ballistic missiles. The parade itself was closed out by a flyover from military helicopters bearing the flag of the Russian Federation, as well as the banners of the armed forces, the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, as well as the Defence Ministry. Around 1,400 veterans were in attendance to see this parade. Some of those veterans had been present at the first parade, had taken part in the first parade to commemorate the victory over Nazi Germany back in 1945. Some very emotional scenes from some of those veterans looking on, remembering what was sacrificed in order to achieve that victory over the Third Reich all those years ago. Now, the celebrations continue here in Moscow and across Russia for the rest of the day. Now, it'll culminate in a spectacular fireworks display at around 10 p.m, or at 10 p.m, I beg your pardon, local time. That's something that if you can tune into RT to see, it is well worth watching. Always a fantastic event, both a celebration and a commemoration of the sacrifice that was made in order to achieve victory over Nazi Germany.